You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. Be sure to smash that like button. LSU just with a massively disappointing effort against Florida State and a loss. What was the single biggest thing that stood out to you watching that game?
Well, I love the guts. They put themselves in that position. I love the guts in a phenomenal 99-yard drive that was set up by some other things. I don't know what the hell Florida State's thinking. You know, it's going hand-to-hand toss. I don't know what Mike Norvell's thinking. Maybe he's thinking he wants to give Deion Sanders the job next year, so let's try to screw this thing up. I don't know. I don't know why you would do that. You don't. I hate to tell Mike this. Mike's a good coach, but you don't have the security that Brian Kelly and Nick Saban and a handful and Dabo Sweeney and a few others have, Kirby Smart in the league. So play smarter than that because it will come back and get them at some point. Things that stuck out. LSU's offensive line needs to get better. They do, Matt. We talked about that. They need to get better. Tackles for losses. Florida State was playing in their backfield. Sacks. That's one. Special teams was awful. Muffed punts, blocked field goal. Obviously, the blocked one at the extra point after the 99-yard drive. So, and to get themselves in position after being down a couple scores and then be recouping late, I do. You try to find. I'm not a big moral victory guy, Matt. I'm not. Especially with your LSU, you're playing that conference. They don't believe in moral victories. I can guarantee you, Brian Kelly doesn't either. And nor should he. Moral victories are for the team that's a 40-point underdog and keeps it to within a touchdown, which they had no chance to win. That's a moral victory, not LSU in Louisiana playing Florida State. So offensive line got to get better. I did not like, the sluggish start, but Jayden Daniels showed me although there wasn't a lot of big yards and a lot of completions, but his feet and his arm both are going to help them in his experience. But they could have rolled up and gone home because there were some really, really missing parts to that with the special teams and the offensive line. But they hung in there, man, if that's as moral as it gets. But you look ahead because it's going to get tougher, and LSU knows this. And I'm not so sure it's overly a shock that they played at times like that, even though Brian Kelly's organized and his teams usually don't beat themselves. Maddie, think about this. Florida State played a 0-week game. I hate the term 0 week because people play. You and I talked about it. But they had a chance to go through the nonsense the first week of 0 week and get it in. This was basically okay, let's try to get through it. And you can't play good teams and turn it over and give up sacks and chase the whole game and expect to win. And when special teams, there's things that turn games around. Turnovers and sacks in your own zone do. But special teams will change the game around in a hurry, and we saw the result.
When you saw those special teams gaffes, Sean, a lot of it is elementary. But
yep.
How do those things happen, and how easy are they to fix?
They should be pretty easy to fix, and if you come from the Brian Kelly school or anybody that head coaches that you see on the field, we say it's a third, Maddie, when in game time, but you don't spend a third of the time on a football practice field with your special teams. You just don't. Now, there are a lot of pre-practice, a lot of post-practice. Trust me, and on those teams I've been on. And then you'll do stuff during practice where you mix it in. But you do not. No team devotes a third of their practice to special teams. They just don't. Maybe in private work on the side, holder, snapper. But because a lot of those guys are also playing. They're playing, so you just don't. So that's part of it. And yes, they're fixable. Now, listen, if you're talking about if your punter's shanking them all the time, or you got a kicker that just can't kick under pressure, eventually that will rear its head. And the way that's fixable is you change the kicker, you change the punter. If you got a guy fielding punts, as I think Brian said that he had a good week of practice, but laid a couple down the game, which was shocking. So even to Brian Kelly, but if that continues to happen under game situations, then you got to look into can anybody back there handle the pressure of doing that? So there's things. It's not just physical. A lot of times, what it is, Maddie, in special teams is they know a guy gets a little bit cute, and I'm not even just referring to LSU game. I'm talking about when you see breakdowns is running down on kickoff. They're told, dude, you keep everything. You're the outside guy. Force it inside. If they break your contain and you get hooked, that's on you. That's a mental mistake. That's not a physical error. I don't care if you got to run 4 yards out of bounds. You do not let them get inside. Then there's if a guy's running down and he's the 2, and he's running down and he sees that he's going to cross his 2 to get into the 1's lane, we number him, and he crosses, and what they do, they set it up because they've watched on tape, and you'll say, okay, put your foot in the ground, and the return team come back and seal off number 2 because he overran the hole. Those are these special teams geniuses, and they study it. If you're out of your lane by a 3 feet, they will find it. And it's the same with, the snaps and special teams. You can't kick an extra point low. You just can't. It's not a 60-yard field goal. You got to get some loft on it. And then easy penetration. You got to find a way. Those things are fixable because these are Division I, Power 5 football players that know how to do it. But it's a concentration and a mental thing. Most of the time when I see or have been a part of a team that's had a special teams there, every now and then a guy will go down and give you a knockout shot. It's just a great football play. Or a guy breaks through and he's got 4.3 speed, and it's like, okay, what are you going to do to that? He's just better. We got to take the L. Most of the time you'll look back and they'll go through that special teams on tape, and they'll say, you stepped right when you should have stepped left. That gave them a small gap, and they found it. Happens all the time, my friend.
Yeah. It does feel like the special team stuff is correctable.
Yep.
It's very fair to ask how much better can the offensive line actually be. And, Sean, I guess if there's one degree of solace, which I've said here, it's, yeah, the offensive line clearly has issues, but how many times are you going to face a defensive line as good as Florida State, which we talked about for 2 months was the strength of their team, and they showed it against a young, inexperienced LSU offensive line. But realistically, how much better can they get?
Yeah, you're exactly right. You'll see if you were to play Clemson, that defensive front is frightening. We know Alabama's physical, but you're not going to come less than 10 of them in the country that you go and you say, okay, this is different. There's good ones that if you play poorly, they'll execute it. But when you're just talking about guys that can beat you and are just better than you because they're so good, not many. There's not many. It's LSU. They know how to get players, but then also comes the scheme. And as you look forward, Matty, if you run into teams that you feel like they can get pressure, or they're pressure teams, or they can get you with 3 or 4 or 5 guys rushing, then you got to decide down the road. Now we know Jayden's got great feet. Is one, do we keep an extra guy in and max, a couple guys in max protect, which limits the number of bodies we can get out? Judicious in your decisions on when to run empty backfield and get them out. Do you trust the 5 guys, and when to chip and when to get out? Those are all game plan situations that next week won't be as difficult. 3 weeks from now when you're playing somebody else, it may be, but you're not going to run into the front that you saw unless there's a handful of teams in the country that'll have more than 1 or 2 guys you say they're Sunday players on. Now, you may find one, but when a team's got more than 1, 2, or 3, like you saw Georgia last year, Georgia this year, Florida State, Clemson, we're talking a different layer and a different type of person at that position.
Probably should have spent more time with you talking specific and going deep dive quarterback here, but let's do that now. We got a couple of minutes left on Jayden Daniels, who was very efficient, Sean. He completed 75% of his passes in the game, and I saw the adjusted completion percentage was actually something like 85%,
right,
despite all the pressure he was under. So tell me what you, in watching him sort of in a technical way, what did you like? Where would you like to see him improve?
I did. I thought he made, as he got going, in clutch and important. It seemed to me, now this is just from the naked eye, I have not gone back, which I did tape the game, and watched before you normally I would, but with fine-tooth comb, the Monday holiday got me, sorry, brother, with fine-tooth comb, fine-tooth comb, and say, okay, this decision. It looked from the naked eye watching the plays and the game that as the pressure rose, he performed better, which, Matty, better to have it that way than the other way around. And he was efficient. He was accurate, at times spectacular. His feet, we know. The key is when to bail out and when not to, and maybe you hang in there for a split second longer and sidestep to make big plays. They're going to have to get more separation. We know their star player didn't have his best game, and that whole situation becomes a bit of an issue that's got to get fixed. But more explosives, Matty. It's great to be efficient. It is. I want a guy get me completions and make the simple play. We got a chance. But there's going to come a point in time while you're protecting it, and it's the first game and your first time with this offense in a game, that he saw some explosives with his feet, and you saw him perform under pressure. Coming out of the locker room, attacking. I love to play to win, but you can't get to the point where it's okay, let's get this game, let's play not to lose, and then we'll hang on close enough to fight our way back. I would like to see a little bit more aggressiveness with more shots and more chances, and that means even if you got to move the pocket and you got to change his launch point, but I think they're on to say he's a good player. He really is, and he's got a wonderful skill set, but you're not going to be able to live in that conference and to be in the national title picture, what they're not going to be in, but live in that conference and survive it by, I hate to say this, by being in 17, 14 games. They're too good. You won't last. Now, if you could keep the other team down, great. But you're going to run into a lot of good quarterbacks and offenses in the league, and at times you're just going to have to flat out match them. I call them chunk plays or explosives in the passing game. It's going to have to get better to move forward. Brian Kelly knows this. So do you, so do I. But the question is, can we hold on to the ball long? How do we manufacture play action or get him on the edge? They're going to have more explosive plays to keep up with the big boys, because while Florida State's good, the big boys are still coming down the pike.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.